All right. This is Clint from the Doorway 2, hanging out with John from Monsterworks. Thanks for doing this on a Saturday evening for you, right?
Yeah, it's just about to go 5 p.m. But no, it's fine. I mean, these days we don't get out much, so it's not really a problem.
Absolutely. No, I agree.
Well before movie night starts as well.
That's what I wanted to kind of catch up with, because I know we talked about a kind of family night for you, and I don't want to ruin it for you. So
yeah, awesome. we're up to the 7th Harry Potter movie, so we don't want to miss that.
No, that's cool though. Those movies are amazing. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just going to start off with I started listening to you with the Black Swan Annihilation record. That's kind of where my world began with Monsterworks. So,
okay, you've known about us for a while then. Cool.
Yeah, about 4 or 5 years. I have a couple records. I think like 2016 or 15 is kind of where I jumped into the picture. So
that sounds. I mean, I even lose track. I think. I think Black Swan Annihilation is 16.
Yeah. But so anyway, I kind of wanted to talk about being that the band's 2 decades old now, pretty much.
Yeah.
Kind of tell us the evolution of Monsterwork, like from the beginning to now. How do you feel things have progressed, changed? Are there things that you wish you did a little differently? Things along those lines.
Right. Well, okay. So the band started in New Zealand around 96, 98, something like that. So over 20 years ago now, and it really just kind of grew out of. I had a buddy at university who liked similar stuff to me, and he was a guitarist. And then there was a guy who I went to high school with, who called Jared, who played drums, and so we used to jam, as you do in the garage, and had dreams of stardom and all that kind of stuff. But we never really did anything when we were at high school. In fact, I didn't really learn. I wanted to be a vocalist, I think, and I didn't start learning guitar until I was about 18 when I went to university. So I was actually away from my hometown. And eventually I met this guy, Ian, who was another guitarist. And I was just thinking about this the other day, actually. So the band actually met for the first time in a studio ready to record. So just the three of us. We didn't have a bass player, but so Ian and I had written some songs. I went to a different city and jammed them out with the drummer, and then those two guys didn't actually meet each other until we got together in a studio to record the first sort of demos and stuff. And we weren't quite called Monsterworks yet, but that came not too long after. Anyway, so we did sort of the usual local metal scene type of thing in New Zealand. There's quite a strong metal scene. We were mainly based in Wellington. The two main cities in New Zealand are Wellington and Auckland. Auckland's the bigger city, but that's where like Ulcerate. Ulcerate?
Yes.
They're sort of doing very well for themselves. Funnily enough, we used to play with some of the bands that were pre sort of Ulcerate, but way back in those days. That got Jamie St. Marat, the drummer. I mean, he was always something special. You knew that he was always going to make something of himself. And anyway, so eventually Ian, the guitarist, left New Zealand and moved to London, and I kept the band going for a little while longer after that. This was 2002 or 2001, and then eventually I moved to London as well. So there was a hiatus for a couple of years, and then Ian and I, on a drunken pub crawl one night, decided that we're going to get the band back together, man. Well, band back together being me and him, and then find some other players, because in the meantime I'd joined another band in London. So I'd met a few musicians. I started sort of branching out and sort of meeting people, whereas Ian was a bit more of a bedroom guitarist. And anyway, so we restarted around sort of 2003 in London with a couple of English guys. One of which was in a band I was already in, Hugo, in fact, who's still in the band now. So Hugo was the drummer in a band that I played in early sort of 2000s, but he didn't feel sort of competent enough to play sort of real fast metal drums, so he was happy to play bass, which he did anyway. Yeah, and eventually this guy James joined, who was only about 18 at the time, and so we're talking around 2005, 2006. We recorded the first Spatial Operations album in 2007. That was with Ian still in the band. Then we did the sequel, Singularity, and then Ian left to what I like to call like domestic oblivion. So it wasn't we fell out or anything. He just basically he was just having a kid at the time. He'd been married for a while, but he was having his first kid. And so then we got Marcus, who's and then so the four of us, Hugo, James, Marcus, and me, John, have been Monsterworks since about 2010 sort of time. So we've been, even as that unit, we've been together for quite a while, and just churning out the music really, like usually about an album a year.
Yeah.
So Malignment is the longest gap there's been for a while, actually.
That's
so
what
it would seem.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. It's been like a 2-year gap, and that's
we've really dropped the ball.
That's kind of
odd. And in fact, it was made under quite unusual circumstances too, because I moved back to New Zealand in 2017, sort of around May, and that was after I think we just released Ultimatum.
Okay.
And we'd recorded the drums. We'd recorded part of Scale and Probability, but it wasn't finished yet. And then I moved back to New Zealand with the family, basically for work. Because I was headhunted effectively. So I went back and lived in Auckland for a year. And we still kept all in touch. And in fact, James, the drummer, recorded the drums for Malignment and another album, which we're still working on at the moment. He recorded those in early 2018 when I was still in New Zealand. So recorded it to sort of demo drums, like click tracks, that kind of stuff. So the Malignment, the drums on Malignment have been hanging around since 2018 and only just seeing the light of day now. And the album after Malignment, which is more or less finished, nice. Sort of it's in the can, like, so the drums are all done. I've done all my guitars. Hugo's still got to do some bass, and Marcus has to work on guitars, but so otherwise we basically do have a follow-up ready for from Malignment, but it's not a sequel. It'll be another concepts thing, but it's not a sequel to. It's not this metal space adventure concept album thing, because it was in the.
That's what I was going to ask. Is all the records kind of seem to have a similar concept going recently? So, was that a thought process all along, or was it kind of like we kind of like this idea and we're just going to continue on?
Well, the first concept album we ever did was Spatial Operations in 2007. Then we did the sequel, Singularity. Then Ian left, and we got Marcus in, and we sort of stripped back, kind of consciously, because I don't know if you've actually ever heard the sequel, Spatial Operations and Singularity, but Ian, the guitarist, he was also getting into programming keys and things like that. So those albums they're very dense in terms of a lot of arrangements and sort of synth backing stuff, and the way he writes guitars also was very layered, like a bit sort of Devin Townsendish, like a lot going on, which sounded great. But after he left, I thought, well, that's sort of an opportunity to strip it back a little bit and go back maybe a bit to how we were in the first place. So the first album Marcus worked on, the God album, is much more stripped back. But I like the idea of having the theme, though. So while we weren't going to have a concept album as such, all of the albums since then have had at least some sort of theme going along in the background. So there was the God album of Man, which these are sort of philosophical type songs, structures. Then we had Earth Universe, Overhaul, the Existential Codex, which is actually my favorite. If you want a tip as to as to which one to listen to.
Awesome.
And then Black Swan Annihilation actually was a little bit of a throwback to some sort of sci-fi concept as well. Although don't ask me what it's really about, because I can't remember. Even I remember doing an interview or two around Black Swan Annihilation and trying to explain what it was about and just getting lost and looking kind of ridiculous when you're trying to explain I wrote it. I wrote all the lyrics and I had no idea what it was about. And
that's awesome.
Well, and also because we tend to be like maybe a year or two, like whatever I'm doing now is a year or two ahead of what that, like, as I say, Malignment was written a long time ago.
Sure.
So I kind of forget where I'm sort of just concentrating on what we're doing at the moment, but also trying to at least get the other stuff finished though.
Sure.
Like Malignment was a while in production because first of all getting the drums done and everything. Then in the meantime I moved back to the UK, had to get everyone else fired up again, especially Marcus, who's a fantastic guitarist, but he needs a bit of TLC to sort of get him going and get his sort of lead juices flowing. That's sort of where we're at now.
So that's kind of what I was saying is like I started listening right at that Black Swan period where it was very sci-fi-ish, and it's kind of stayed that direction ever since. So it's kind of cool. Like it's always had kind of a futuristic kind of vibe to what I've been hearing.
Yeah, I mean, and it's quite sort of philosophical, really, like sort of pondering life's big questions and often putting that to some sort of kind of sci-fi-ish theme. I mean, Alternatum. What on earth was that about? I don't really remember now. So some kind of esoteric sort of exploration. Scale and Probability was definitely about the Fermi paradox. So considering, is there life out there? Is there intelligent life out there in the universe type of thing? And the album goes through the different, possible answers to that. Like, yes, there is. No, there isn't. They've all moved on or something, or they've passed into another plane of existence or something like that. So that's what that one was about. And then Malignment is, I always just liked the actual sci-fi narrative from Spatial Operations. I always felt it was doing something a little bit different to other sci-fi shows and things like that out there. But capturing that kind of free spirit, because I'm a Star Wars kid, so it's kind of like that sort of thing.
Same here. I don't know. Your music kind of gives me now. I don't know if you've ever watched it before, but like Firefly, things like that. You kind of like I kind of feel like that. You might be one of the brown coats, kind of doing.
You actually get that from the music or the vibe of the. Because that's an interesting. Because obviously Firefly was very country. If it had a soundtrack, it was almost like sort of twanging guitars and stuff like that.
It's just a TV show itself. It kind of gives me that kind of same vibe of what like the overall theme of what you're doing is like you're the outsiders looking in, trying to see what the future is going to hold and like what's going.
Yeah. And just putting the cards on the table. That is my favorite single sci-fi show, I would say. Nice. I mean, it hasn't been topped, and I don't even. It's just the vibe of it was so cool. It's ridiculous. The actual premise of it is ridiculous. Yep. But then sometimes that's what makes the best sort of allegories, I suppose, for real life. Like my favorite movie is Jaws.
Nice.
And Jaws is a stupid film. Like if you actually break it down, like it's not. It doesn't make any sense, really. Like, sharks aren't malevolent killing machines. They are killing machines, but they don't take things personally or anything like that. But it's just a great script, very well made. With the technology was sparse, so they had to do the best with what they had. And Firefly is maybe a little bit like that as well. It was character based rather than lots of flashy special effects. I mean, there were some, but they look a bit dated now. But
But that's the best sci-fi. Let's be honest, man.
Yeah,
Like low budget where you have to have theater of the mind kind of stuff going on. That's always
yeah.
the best stuff. Yeah, no, awesome. So I kind of want to dig into what you said about Devin Townsend because that was actually one of the questions I was going to have with you. Is when I listen to Monsterworks, I know it's not 100% there, but Opeth and Devin Townsend seem to be a big reoccurring kind of musical theme or idea, especially musically with Devin Townsend and Opeth. Vocally, I kind of hear
Yeah.
I hear Opeth as well too. So I kind of want to see, were they inspirations to what you were doing, or are you really just kind of adding on to what their legends already are?
Uh, I mean, it's a fair comparison because I am definitely a fan. In fact, the last gig I think I went to before shutdown and all this sort of stuff was Devin Townsend, uh, which is actually you can get it was the is it Empath? That's the latest one.
Oh, the
Uh,
live,
yeah, the live one at the Roundhouse. So I was actually there. Like, so
nice.
I've been watching some of the videos on YouTube, and although I kind of go hot and cold on Devin Townsend, like I think that there's no doubt about it, he's a genius, but he has so much material, and some of it hits the mark, and some not so much for me. I think. I mean, but then when I watch the videos and watch vocally what he does, I mean, I think he possibly is the greatest metal vocalist,
Yeah,
and I'm from the with Halford, who is
same
my
here.
favorite metal vocalist. But I think what Devin does with his vocals is pretty insane. Um, I don't know about musically. I think maybe well, it's in the DNA because Ian, who I mentioned, our original lead guitarist. I mean, he was a huge Devin Townsend fan. In fact, that's who I went to that last gig with. Um, so yeah, musically there's been a bit of that, and Opeth too, I suppose. I guess mainly what Opeth brought to the table, or old Opeth,
Yeah,
the good stuff, is
right.
is that real contrast between the death metal uh, and I mean, yeah, and I think I'm going a bit more prog, in my old age type of thing as well. But I liked how they did that, and I thought no one did it better, and it's a shame that they're not still doing it, but I still understand that they want to grow as artists, and because
Sure.
the stuff they do now is still great, it's just different.
It's just much more
And
prog. Yeah, no, you're right.
yeah, but they do it, they do that well as well. But the contrast of the vocals and uh the the light and dark, it's true, that's what I yeah,
Good.
there's no
Good.
doubt about it, that was an influence, and that's come along more in the later career of Monsterworks. Like, we started off, really, we were more of a straight up, well, were we a death metal band? I don't know. What we were most influenced by, or who we wanted to be when we first started out, was Carcass. That kind of and I just don't think we were technically good enough, but we originally wanted to be a dual vocal band. Like, Ian was going to do the heavy, like the grunting
Yeah.
Bill Steer type vocals, and I was going to do the yelpy other ones, and then somewhere along the lines I just took over doing everything, whereas he sort of specialized in lead guitar. So that's kind of how we evolved. So yeah, so we definitely wanted to be like Carcass to begin with, and then but you sort of, you evolve and change, and then all these. Uh, but in terms of overall influences, I mean, I always just go back to the classics like Priest and Sabbath. Really, that's what it always comes back to. So I love modern stuff. Um, if I'm looking for new music, it will be sort of modern death and black metal and post metal, a lot of that sort of stuff. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of different influences, but my LP collection is all old stuff. It's all the 70s and 80s, uh, and I still listen to it every
Completely
day.
understand. No, I completely understand. I'm 48 years old too, so like I grew up during that time too. So that's kind of like where I wanted to tie into it is I wanted to name a couple of bands that kind of like, so Monsterworks to me is very unusual because you mix 7 or 8 or 20 different styles of music at the same time. It's not something that's just paint by the numbers death metal or paint by the numbers prog. Like, you have to be able to have kind of a wide umbrella of musical understanding to get what Monsterworks is doing. It's not something that you could just simply listen to one time and be like, all right, that's exactly what they are. But some of the bands that like I have, when I've listened to you over the last 4 records, Priest and Halford for one, like your high screams sometimes, man, like they just, I can hear you wanting to be like, do the Halford.
Yeah.
Like, it's freaking, it's fucking
I mean,
amazing.
that's how it was mimicking Halford is how I learned to sing. I mean, I guess because I got into that around sort of 14, age 14, driving your voice to do that, you sort of almost have to do it at that age, because I think if once your voice drops, you're going to lose it. So,
Right.
so yeah, that's how it happened, was just trying to, what, singing along to Priest, I suppose. I mean, I've never really tried to actually be him or sound,
Yeah.
exactly like him, but
You could
but
feel
the capability, yeah, comes from Priest and probably King Diamond and things like that as well.
that was the other one I was going to say is there's a lot of Merciful Fate kind of vibes going on it as well too. And in other bands like I don't know if you know, like I think you guys have a lot of Nevermore influences too, like especially guitar and vocally and the melodies that you do. Other
Yeah.
bands, yeah, and then other bands that I hear, you mentioned Carcass, and that was going to be one I was going to kind of talk about as well too, because you can kind of hear the guttural snarls or that really kind of UK kind of buzzsaw guitar at times, which is really cool with the
Yeah.
melody mixes. And then the other two bands I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit more, where they may not be as much in your wheelhouse, but I think that you guys really kind of encompass it. Is there's a band called Disco Fashion in the U.S. and I don't know if you've ever heard them before,
No.
but you have a very similar vocal style to the lead vocals in that band, where he can go from death to melodies to harmonies all in the same way, and they do the same kind of ebb and flow of heavy, fuzzy, dirty, bluesy, and then go back into more of a death metal kind of vibe. And then the last one I kind of wanted to talk about, and it's an older band, is there's a lot of like feelings of atheist to me. And I don't know if you've liked them. So I know they're a very love hate kind of band, but I kind of wanted to see what your thoughts were
Well,
on like
that's interesting, because I think very early on someone said, "Oh, you guys sound like atheists." To this day, I don't think I've heard them, and that's no lies. And the other one you mentioned, I hadn't heard of, but you can send me a link to it, because I'd be interested
I will.
to hear it. But yeah, atheist. I mean, because they were kind of they were an early death metal. Are they actually classified as death metal?
So early on, they were a full-on death metal band, and in their
Right.
last 2 or 3 records are very kind of prog tech death.
Yes, like Gorguts or something like
Right.
that. Which is actually another band, hilariously, which I've hardly heard, but I did pick up. I think it was Coloured Sands, because I kept on reading about how great it was.
Yeah.
So funnily enough, like, so it's a time and place type of thing. Like, I was influenced by whatever your friends are into at the time, like at high school. And so if no one was getting these other records, although the names were around, so I definitely heard Atheists and things like that. But, but my friends were, I mean, I guess they were into more Morbid Angel and things like that. Although me personally, I've never particularly been into Morbid Angel. I've heard their stuff and like it, but for some reason it never quite clicked. But actually, you know what? One of the biggest influences, or sort of which actually put me mainly onto the heavier music, was Annihilator.
Nice.
Because my buddies at school, well, there was a little bit of Slayer and things like that going around, but I didn't find it very accessible and kind of just a little bit weird sounding. Because in the sort of late 80s, Slayer was still pretty like sort of impenetrable, I suppose. And then someone got Annihilator, Alice in Hell, the first
absolutely.
record, and maybe vocally, because it had that sort of harsh, it had harsh vocals, or harshish, but they were a little bit more understandable or something. And then the music was amazing, very technical, and so that was really what turned me on to thrash, I think. And then after that, it's a gateway drug, isn't it? And but yeah, those sort of technical death bands, a lot other than death itself, probably didn't have that much early influence from that sort of stuff. Actually, I kind of preferred like Obituary, and when it comes to your sort of meat and potatoes death metal, like you can't beat Obituary, and that's not technical at all, but it's just so good. And and John Tardy's never lost a beat with his vocals. He still sounds great. So and that, I remember one of our early gigs, someone coming up to me and saying, "Oh, you sound like John Tardy," like because I probably was putting a bit of that into it. So all those sorts of things are influences. That, I guess the difference is that I wanted to do it all, whereas most bands, they find their niche and they like to stay in it, and then people expect that of them. Whereas we've, probably to our detriment, but we've always tried to do whatever we want, and vocally, no one tells me what to do. So sometimes I don't even know what vocals are going to be there until I'm standing in front of a microphone.
Very cool.
Is it going to be a sort of a shouted, almost James Hetfield type, raw, driven roar sort of thing, or a death grunt or a shriek or whatever. Sometimes until you're actually there in front of the microphone, you don't know what's going to come out.
Cool. So the next thing I was going to kind of follow up into that kind of whole vibe is, so there's a and maybe I'm just hearing and I'm crazy. You can tell me, it's fine. But I hear a very like 70s, 80s heavy blues, and then kind of there's jazzy elements into it. So and what I talk about is I'm talking about like there's that Deep Purple, there's that Cream, there's that early Sabbath kind of like fuzz tone that always comes into the picture and kind of gives a doomy element to what you do. And then, like I said, I hear this jazzy overtone, and I don't know if that's the other members and not you, or how it is, but do you hear it as well, or is it something?
No, I think that's fair. Again, and that is probably more prevalent on the more recent albums, the sort of the bit slightly more bluesy, even stonery rock kind of stuff. I think the blues, or one area where that comes out is the leads, and that's Marcus, really, because that's just kind of, well, Marcus's main influence, he'll tell you, would be Dimebag and Tony Iommi, I guess.
Gotcha.
Which aren't necessarily, well, Tony's obviously is his basis is in the blues, but so the lead playing, that does change the music a lot. So sometimes I'll write something, but by the time it's finished, it'll sound completely different to how it started. Like as in the bedrock music won't have changed that much, but because of the lead choice that he makes, it sort of makes it more rocky and bluesy. Yeah. And then that's actually what I like about his playing, is that because he's not hyper technical, but he has chops, or at least he does when he practices, and that makes it unique, I think, because I'm trying to write death metal songs, and then he's putting blues leads over them. So some guys would not like that at all. Say, no, do what I say. Like make it more, sort of stuff. But it worked. I'll give him more or less free reign, and that's the sort of stuff he comes up with, and that's where the collaboration comes in the music. Now, you mentioned jazz. I mean, I don't quite know where that comes from. Sometimes there might be a jazzy section, which probably came about because when I'm programming sort of practice demo drums and stuff, it might have had like a jazz patch. And I just put that in for a laugh, and then just sort of play over it, and then it ends up being in the song. Gotcha. So because that's often how I build. The songs are often quite linear in a way, as in they'll start with one thing, and then they'll evolve into something completely different by the end of the song, and not necessarily repeat a lot. And that's just a consequence of how I demo music often, because we don't jam like a lot of I wish we did, but we don't really, we sort of live in different cities and things like that, and we don't we tend to get together as a band to practice ready for recording an album. And we don't play live a lot, so we don't sort of jam through things. And I think maybe a jam band would sometimes you end up with a bit more of a orthodox sort of song structure, because you go, oh well, it's time to go back to the verse now or whatever. Whereas if you like me, where you sort of build up the song from the start, it doesn't always occur to me to go back to the beginning again. Sometimes I make myself do it, thinking, well, really, we want to see that chorus again, or we want to see that verse because it was cool at the beginning. So why are we wasting it, But otherwise, sometimes I've gone a bit off the rails just by, and sometimes it is just the program drums in the background that influence what the music's doing.
Nice. So I kind of want to ask a little bit about the whole DIY process that you guys have. Eat, Lead, Die. That's your own label, right? It's not somebody else that's doing it, correct?
Yeah, it's pretty much that was a joke that someone came up in high school. Like Eat, Lead, and Die was obviously it comes from probably a Dirty Harry line or something like that, like Eat, Lead, and Die. But I misunderstood it, and I thought it meant literally eat lead, like as in like because lead will kill you, like eat lead and die. So I took it very literally, and then I thought, well, I'm a rhythm guitarist, so maybe it's eat lead and die. So it's got all these double meanings, but really it's like the name Monsterworks itself is just a bit of a joke, really. So we have had brushes with labels in the past, but it's never particularly worked for us. And and the way the music industry is now, getting stuff out there isn't so much a problem. I mean, I use a PR company to get stuff out for review and things like that. So, I wouldn't be opposed to it if someone was interested, to do a sort of collaboration but at the same time, it's fine how things are going. And you talk about DIY, so we. Well, I do all demos and stuff like that at home, but we try and use a proper studio, at least for recording the drums. So it's true that Malignment, well, it was recorded in a semi-proper studio. It was basically James and his mate who they hired a studio, and then he was actually turned out to be a really good sound engineer. And then it's true most of the guitars, well, all of the guitars have been recorded sort of in home studios and stuff. Using isolation cabinets. Are you familiar with that? Yeah,
I am. Yes.
Yeah. And because when you're close micing a loud speaker, like the room doesn't really seem to matter too much. I mean, like a big producer will say, "Oh no, the room's like absolutely critical," but when you're putting a microphone in front of a ridiculously loud speaker, like how much can the room ambience really affect it?
Exactly.
So we do that. So both Marcus and I have isolation cabinets at home. Sometimes I'll go down to his place to record rather than him come to me, because then he can press record rather than me have to do it. Hugo does the bass at home, and then and I had Damien Herring mix it. Yeah. Damien from Horrendous. So, and he actually mastered Black Swan Annihilation. So that's when I first sort of came across him, and I came across him because of Horrendous, and also because I sort of semi-frequent forums and stuff which regarding like high dynamic, like full dynamic sort of music and stuff like that, and his name kept coming up. When you put dynamic metal together, like then the Horrendous records, they sound good, and so he had a good reputation for that, and so that's why I sort of gone to him. This is the first time for Malignment I've actually used him for mixing.
Nice.
And he's done a really good job, considering what he started with, because it's all home recorded guitars and things like that. But he did a good job, as good as it could be, really, I think.
No, they sound really full, and that's what I was going to say. Is if you're doing it all at home and doing it piece by piece, it still sounds like a big, massive, thick record. So that's great.
Yeah, and that's because that is down to the mixing, sort of Damien pulling it all together. I mean, I had everything laid out. The songs were all arranged and everything, but he just put the polish on it really, which just makes it sound. But I mean, I just don't have the time to sort of learn. I know a lot about mixing and stuff, but in terms of actually getting it to a standard that I want it, like it would just take me so long, and I just rather spend my time writing music, and that's what it comes down to. I mean, it costs you something, obviously, to have a professional mix, but I think it's money well spent. Because that's the legacy, isn't it? That's what you're left with is what the recording is going to sound like, and that's going to be with you forever. So, whereas I did actually, I think I mixed Scale and Probability myself, and then I got Dan Swano to master it.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't sound as good. And that's. I mean, I kind of was going for a very raw sound, so I did minimal processing on any of the instruments and stuff. So I really wanted it to sound like that's what instruments sound like. That's what drums sound like in a room, without messing with them, And I can still listen to it. It's quite listenable as an album, but it doesn't sound anywhere near as well put together, I think, as Malignment. So yeah, I think I know what I'm doing from now on, because it's just it just works better that way.
Cool. So I kind of want to ask you, so if somebody was going to listen to Malignment for the very first time, it was going to be their first record that they've ever listened to for Monsterworks, how would you explain it to them right before they listen to it? Like what kind of what would be the elevator pitch?
That's a tough one, because I mean, well, as you said before, it can be quite impenetrable music to someone who's not. It's like, be prepared for anything. Like, I hope you like a lot of different styles of metal, and if you don't, maybe this isn't for you, or maybe you'll be surprised. I mean, I think the album itself kind of eases you into it. The first track has a fairly long sort of instrumental sort of intro, and then it hits you with the doom, and then it sort of evolves, and hopefully it's sort of digestible, but I don't know how I could possibly convince anybody to listen to it really. If the whole thing is that whether you do have a broad interest in metal, and it is metal too. I mean, I don't listen to a lot else. So, but metal in itself is so broad as a genre now, that why do you need to listen to anything else? I mean, if you want to listen to, if you like electronic stuff, you can find bands which are incorporating that kind of thing. If you like jazz, there's like White Ward, and there's these new bands coming along now, these freaky jazz bands which like sort of have saxophones and stuff, and then all of a sudden they're doing blast beats. It's not for everybody, but I can listen to that sort of stuff in small doses.
Oh no, I mean there's stuff like Rivers and Nahal that are just doing crazy stuff with jazz saxophones and stuff.
Yeah.
No, I'm totally with you. So I'm gonna ask just a couple more questions, wrap it up, so you can kind of get to your family night as well too.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wanted to ask, being that you and I are both not kids anymore, what's your thoughts on the current extreme scene in the digital age? Do you think there's too many bedroom bands? Do you think there's a lot of good stuff happening right now, or do you have to kind of wade through the mire to be able to get to what's really what people should be listening to today?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't think about it too much. I mean, I listen to a lot of new music. I frequent a forum called Metalfi, which is and I came across that because they're sort of all about dynamics, like high dynamic range in music and stuff. So, and well produced music, although we don't always see eye to eye with what actually sounds good. But anyway, but by going to forums and reading reviews and things like that, you can hear about good stuff. You see, I don't feel compelled that I must listen to everything, so I don't have that sort of problem. But you're right that there's so much going on, but I kind of just let it rise to the surface. Like if one name is just coming up over and over again, like Blood Incantation.
Yeah.
Like I think I did hear the record before the current one, Starspawn, was it? And I thought, oh, that's pretty good. And then the new one comes out and they're just getting like rave reviews everywhere. And so eventually you go, oh, okay, I'll have to listen to it. It's like, oh yeah, that is pretty good. So yeah, it can be perceived as a problem, to have to wade through all of the stuff that's out there, but a lot of it is really good. I mean, I suppose one downside of not having the old classic sort of record label thing is that there's no gatekeepers anymore. So, and record labels and producers and things like that, sometimes they weren't always on the money, but sometimes they did give good guidance as to, what bands should be doing. My biggest bugbear actually is the length of albums. And maybe it's coming back in the right direction, but for a long time, it was hard to find any release that was like less than an hour or something like that. Yeah. And there's a reason, or there came to be a reason why, that sort of classic LP length of about 40 minutes, it's a good attention span. And I find that anything that goes beyond that, it better be really good. Like otherwise, why have you put these extra songs on it?
Yeah.
And I hear about bands. Maybe it's more in the funeral doom sort of space or whatever. There was a band, Bellwitch. I'm sure you've heard of them. I've never actually heard it, but I know they released a single track, 80-minute song. And I thought, nope, I'm just not listening to that. It might be the greatest music that has ever been put to tape, but that's just too long. Like, how dare you try to take that much of my time up? The only band that has earned that was Typo Negative. Like they did have really long albums, but they were really good, But other than that, unless you're doing your career-defining double concept album, stick to 40 minutes, and it's because why wouldn't you? Like, it's just it keeps it punchy. It keeps the attention there. So sometimes I even use that as a sort of a yardstick for whether I'm going to bother listening to an album. I look on Bandcamp and look at how long the tracks are. And if they add up to, I don't mind if they've got long tracks, like 10-minute tracks don't bother me. But if the whole thing adds up to like 65 minutes, then I'm thinking, I don't know, should I even get into this? Because there's so much out there. And so I think but in the old days, the record label said to you, well, you can't put more than 42 minutes on it because it has to fit on a vinyl, and we're not pressing a double vinyl for you. Unless you're Pink Floyd doing The Wall, then we're not, because vinyl was expensive for them to make and all the rest of it. Whereas these days, every band seems to be releasing double vinyls of all this, sort of music, and it just seems a bit stupid and it won't even fill up the double vinyl either. So you're constantly flipping the thing over. So that's okay. Anyway, I don't know if that answered the question, but
no, it did, and it did pretty well. I appreciate it. So the last question I ask every band, and I get strange answers, so I kind of want to see what your feedback is going to be. So if you could have any one band cover Monsterworks and make it their own, what band would you want to hear interpret your works?
Interpret. The first name that popped into my head was Metallica.
Okay, that's awesome.
Just because they're enormous, and if they play, in fact, I think I must have. was it Blue Oyster Cult or someone said, oh yeah, when they covered our song, like all of a sudden they were millionaires, sort of thing. I don't know if it was quite that, but and they're good musicians, and why not? Here, James, and get over, that would be fine.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's as good as I've got.
No,
and Peter Steele's dead, because Type O used to do fantastic covers because they made that their own. So yeah, but that's not going to happen. But
no, it's not. Unfortunately, Pete's gone. Unfortunately, yeah. But so I'm going to leave the last bit of this to you. Tell folks where they can get your music, what's going on, what's happening in the future. I'm kind of giving you the soapbox for the next couple minutes.
Well, if you want to check us out, then Bandcamp is the best place to do it. We've got pretty much all of the discography up there. Buy it on a Bandcamp Friday when we get all of the proceeds. I mean, that was good of Bandcamp to sort of start doing that kind of thing. And do the same with the other bands you like as well. Don't support streaming platforms. Cancel your Spotify subscription. So yeah, just support bands directly, I think. I mean, fine, buy stuff from labels and all the rest of it. But the opportunities to support bands are better than they've ever been, really. And so from my perspective, that's how I see things. I mean, when like illegal downloading and stuff came along all those years ago, I did that. But I haven't downloaded an album in 10 years, because I just came to the realization that Lars was right and I was wrong, and now with platforms like Bandcamp where you can buy stuff directly off them, and also I support digital downloads, actually, like paid digital downloads. I think is the best way you can get music. By all demand 24-bit masters, full dynamic range. Like, ask labels why they're compressing the shit out of the music. Just sort of spread the word on good sounding metal, really. It's not a lot about Monsterworks, because we don't have any like live shows or anything sort of planned. Who knows when the next time that's going to happen will be for us. But send us a message on Facebook. Again, I wish there was an alternate to Facebook, really. I think sort of a platform where more for music, really, where you could interact with fans, where you could buy your downloads, have some level of, I mean, I have a very negative attitude towards Spotify, but I mean, obviously streaming, the idea of streaming in the old sort of radio sense, I think is absolutely fine. Put out your single. You've got to put stuff out there for people to hear it. But I do think that these subscription streaming services are destroying the sort of the album and the revenue streams for artists. Unless you're a big player who can sort of dictate, and negotiate what your sort of royalty rate is going to be. So for me, Bandcamp is the kind of the greatest innovation of the last 10 years or however long it's been going. I think it's fantastic. I don't begrudge them their 15%, because they've provided a great platform, and now they're giving it away anyway on first Friday of every month.
Yeah, so, they are. Yeah. No, it's awesome. And they have a lot of the artists do the pay what you want too. So, like I said, a lot of these artists, on certain Fridays, you'll see buy our old albums for $3 or whatever, and like that's a fantastic way to have people jump into your older works to be able to get your newer stuff too. So, Bandcamp is a really great outlet. I don't disagree.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you so much for your time.
No problem at all.
Really do love the band. Going to continue on being a fan. I will make sure your Bandcamp and your Facebook and your website links are all attached to the actual interview once it's up. And I'll make sure you get a copy of it and you can see it once it's done.
Cool. Yeah, and we'll obviously push it out on the social media and stuff as well, as as far as we can.
I appreciate it. Again,
No, it's been great talking.
no, awesome. This is Clint from the Doorway too, hanging out with Jon from Monsterworks. Thanks, and you have a great weekend and enjoy Harry Potter.
I will do. Thanks.
Bye.
You too. Bye.